Hello and welcome to The New Normal with me, Adrian Masters, a podcast from ITV Wales. Our aim in these podcasts is to talk about politics and the pandemic. And in this episode, I'm joined by intensive care consultant Amy Jones and Liberal Democrat Senedd candidate Bill Powell. Bill was hospitalised with coronavirus last year and Amy was part of the team who helped save his life. I brought them together for them to be able to talk about all that for the first time, and it's been a privilege to hear their stories. Well, thank you both for joining me on the podcast. I want to ask, is this the first time that the two of you have been interviewed together? Bill?
Yes, it is. I've heard Amy on many occasions and listened intently, but we've not been, and we stay in some a touch occasionally via social media and message, but we've not been interviewed together now.
Amy, you treated Bill at Neville Hall, is that right?
I did. I was the consultant on call the night that he unfortunately ended up in intensive care with COVID. It was actually the very first night of the kind of clap for healthcare thing, because I remember I was sat in my colleague's house and because I was staying out of the house away from my family at the time, and we were about to kind of go outside and my phone went off and said, well, this is a really sick guy, you need to come back in. And that's where I met Bill.
Did you know about his political career before then? He was just another patient to be looked after.
Yeah. Didn't have any idea whatsoever. It was only the next day, actually, someone said, I think this guy's a politician. It's like, well, that's okay. We treat him the same.
I couldn't answer back, could I?
The perfect way to deal with a politician when they can't answer back. Seriously, though, Bill, you really went through the mill. What was your experience of having COVID? Can you remember much about it?
Well, I remember from mid-March becoming symptomatic and going to bed early about I think it was on the 18th of March that I went to bed about 8:30, and I'm a bit of a night owl, so that was being sent to bed or just taking myself to bed was an indicator there was something that wasn't well.
Did you know it was COVID right away?
No, but I think I had that sixth sense that it was, but I was very tired and had a high temperature. I sensed that it almost certainly was, and then was pretty much confined to bed then for the next 8-10 day period. And around the Tuesday of the week before I was admitted and met Amy in that sense on the Thursday the 26th of March, I had that false sense that I understand a lot of COVID patients have, that there was light at the end of the tunnel, and I was just getting better, and but in fact that wasn't the case, and I had some shortness of breath on the Tuesday, Wednesday leading up to the Thursday, and then I was taken to see my GP in Crickhowell on that afternoon, and my SATs level I'm told were at 77. And there was a bluing of the lips and so on, and Dr. Barnes told me there's only one place you need to be, and that's in Neville Hall straight away.
How bad a condition was he in, Amy?
As I said, his oxygen levels were very low, and obviously by the time I'd seen him, he'd been in A&E for an hour or so, having high flow oxygen to see if that would improve things. It's funny because a lot of the patients don't feel too bad. Once they have some oxygen, they feel a bit less hypoxic. We call them the happy hypoxics. So they don't feel horrifically breathless. They don't feel too poorly, but actually his oxygen levels were still very low, even though he was kind of receiving the most amount of oxygen you can via a normal face mask. And so I can't remember if we did manage to get you to speak to your wife. We often try and get the patients before they go off to sleep, because obviously we don't know which way it's going to go, to call home and just have a quick chat and let them know what's going to happen themselves. And then we whisked them around to the ICU.
Yeah, I sent a message which I've referred to a sort of final text as I've referred to it, saying off to ICU now. Don't know where this is going. ... And I didn't see that then for 3 weeks or more, or no, a month more actually, when I was in the rehab, the closed rehab ward, and about a week into my post ICU rehab.
So that's the text that you sent to Ria, your wife.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And that's the last thing that you remember before.
Yeah.
Oh no, you don't. Oh, you don't actually remember sending it, do you?
No, I remember sending the text, but I remember being escorted down the corridor towards ICU, but I don't recall a whole lot. I don't recall anything other than a whole set of impressions, some really acute impressions, and some recollections, and some quite lurid sort of dreams of that period, and the impressions that you retain from ICU, which are quite extraordinary.
My goodness me. Is that PTSD, Amy, or is it?
No, it's very common in ITU. We give you quite a lot of funny drugs to keep you asleep. And you've lost a chunk of your life. It's gone. You don't know where it's gone. And then as you wake up, some of the drugs hang around a little bit. And what you kind of see, or what you're kind of able to kind of see and interpret as best you can when you've got a plastic tube in your throat, you often kind of misinterpret. So we've had lots of patients who come to follow-up clinics saying, I thought you lot had kidnapped me, and I thought I was on a boat, and all kinds of wacky stuff. And it's really, really normal. It's more unusual that someone comes through and says, oh no, I feel fine. I didn't have any funny dreams. The vast majority of people have very odd experiences, and sometimes that carries on. And I think it's more of an issue if it's carrying on chronically, and people are waking up from sleep with kind of intrusive thoughts and things like that. But the fact that they've had funny dreams is really, really normal.
Does that have an impact on their mental well-being, or I mean, that perhaps that's over dramatizing it, but does it have some kind of effect in the longer term?
I don't know about long term. In the short term, it can make it difficult to kind of get the rehab going, because sometimes they don't trust us and they think we're trying to kill them, and that's quite a common thing. But I think on the whole, probably William will be able to tell us, but I think probably the impact of having been completely fit and well, losing a month of your life, and then waking up weak as a kid and not able to walk and feed yourself, probably has more of an impact than kind of some funny intrusive dreams. Your life gets completely tipped upside down. And I think coming to terms with that often is more difficult than some of the intrusive kind of dreams.
Is that your experience then, Bill?
When I did wake up, I was, it was like a semi-consciousness for a period, and then there was a TV monitor, and there were two things. The first two things that I recall was an elderly gentleman walking around a yard with a sort of Zimmer or walker, but I didn't know what it was about because there was no sound. And then there was the image of Norman Hunter of Leeds United in England, who I recognised, and I think there was a kind of caption as to, because he had died. He died of COVID. He died on the first day that I was in ICU, but just starting to regain consciousness and some sense as to what had happened.
This is the sort of thing that I would never normally ask any politician, but given what we're talking about, how scared were you? How close do you feel that you came to? How close did you feel you came to dying in that whole time?
I think Amy probably knows the answer to that more closely than I do, and I have been promised, and I'm sure it will come in the fullness of time, a diary by colleagues of Amy's as to what the pattern was of my journey through ICU. But I felt a certain kind of serenity when I went in, but my sense is that my sense of some of those really intense periods that I do half recall of the whole teams gathering around and doing things that were pretty urgent. My sense is that there were some pretty close calls within that 2.5 week period. But I don't know, and I dare say in the fullness of time I'll perhaps revisit that and be able to relate it to the diary of my treatment, which I think I will have in time when the teams are a little less busy than they are now.
What can you tell us, Amy? I'm not used to this. I don't know how to phrase these questions. I don't know whether I'm asking something inappropriate. This is way out of my comfort zone. I'm used to, if I've got someone like Bill Powell in front of me, I'm used to challenging him and having a go at him on things. This is. If this is an inappropriate question, please tell me. What can you tell us about Bill's condition?
Yeah, I mean, he was sick enough to need ITU. He got COVID, which is a horrific illness. And, you know, we always say if you end up in ITU on a breathing machine with COVID, you're sick enough to die. And at the time, the stats, we thought, you know, it was pretty much 50-50. It was toss of a coin. Will you live or will you die? Yeah. You know, I think the worst thing about treating COVID as a doctor is it makes you feel quite helpless. At the time, we didn't know what treatments worked. I mean, we've got a couple of treatments now in the second wave that we use. But I think it was more that helplessness. You know, normally, if Bill came in normally with a pneumonia, I'd say, well, he's a pretty fit guy. You know, he's got age on his side. This pneumonia is quite bad. But, you know, I would think he would get through this. With COVID, you've got absolutely no idea. I've had patients younger and fitter than Bill who've died from it. And there's no rhyme or reason. They got the same treatment, you know, and unfortunately some people are just, I think, genetically predisposed to have this massive inflammatory response to the virus, and kind of despite what we do, they die, even if we put multiple machines on them. I think from memory, Bill, he didn't need kidney support. He needed a little bit of blood pressure support. That was to do with the sedation. Obviously, he needed a lot of help with the ventilator, and he probably would have spent some time on his tummy because his oxygen levels are low. But he won't think he had a pretty straightforward run through ITU as far as a COVID patient goes. I mean, he did end up having a tracheostomy. You don't mind me?
No, absolutely.
So some patients we do manage to get off the ventilator without that, but lots of them end up with a tracheostomy. So he kind of had a middle of the road run through ITU. Didn't need too many machines out the cupboard to kind of support his organs, but needed enough that, you know, he was sick enough to die the whole time he was there.
Wow. Gosh. Bill, a couple more questions on this, and then we will move on, I promise. Have you had any lasting effects? When we talked about that, you talked about the impressions and the feelings. Some people talk about long COVID. Have you experienced anything like that?
To be honest, I think I've been really fortunate in not experiencing what I've heard described as long COVID, partly because of the quality of the subsequent 3 weeks in the closed rehab ward, and the work that was started by a fantastic team of physios that then continued, supported by the Nye Bevan Health Board in terms of ongoing support with access to gym facilities. And I don't mind admitting, over the intervening 35-40 years, I've been a bit of a gym dodger, exercise dodger. And to be in the sports village at Newport with a team of fellow survivors, and dedicated support from sort of personal trainers for the period from mid-June until on into November, actually, has been extraordinarily helpful, and I've taken full advantage of that. And when the first sort of lockdown or firebreak kicked in back in November, was it? I then intensified my own exercise program of, you know, 5K runs. But I mean, run is a loose term. It's a mixture of walk, shuffle, and run. But I've been doing that between November and yesterday morning, 3 times a week for the last sort of 2.5 months, and I'm committed to keeping doing that. But it wasn't part of my life previously, and I can't quite believe that it is now. But there's a reason for that, and that's what I want to repay some of the investment that Amy and her fantastic colleagues have made in me over many months.
That's one way that this experience has changed you. Have there been other ways?
I suppose it makes you reappraise what's important in life, and the activity program that I took on with walking and exploring my own area. I think my appreciation of the natural world from May, June, July, all the way through, has been much more intense, perhaps than I'm like Amy. I've got the privilege of living in a really beautiful area, but born and brought up in this area. But I think you do tend to take it for granted, and I've come to appreciate the natural environment incredibly more in terms of the change of the seasons and the just the trees and the hedgerows and the views. I've just become much more intensely aware of that, and a sense of the privilege that I've got to have access to that.
And I suppose before I go back to Amy, this is, your gratitude, I suppose, is the right word to the staff has come through everything that you say. But this is your chance to pass on via Amy your message to the medical staff, I suppose. What would you say?
Well, absolutely, it's a massive thank you. I mean, I know that there was quite a lot of coverage back at the time of my exit, both from the ward, but also from Neville Hall and the main foyer of Neville Hall. And I'll never know, but I suspect that the lady we're talking to here was something to do with that, because I did exchange Twitter direct message with her on the morning, and Amy was unavailable because I think she was committed elsewhere that day. But I wanted to, on my way out, to try to leave a little gift and message at ICU for whoever was on. We called by there, but then when I was sort of wheeled out down to the main entrance, the phenomenal gathering of people there, which followed a wonderful but slightly more intimate leaving of the ward. It was quite extraordinary and very, very moving.
Well, she's got a chance to confess now, if that's the case. Was that what did it, Amy?
Well, I mean, the hospital as a whole were quite good at kind of, they wanted to kind of clap the patients out as they left the hospital. But I had kind of messaged ITU and kind of said, look, Bill's going today. You know, he would love to see you. Should we give him a bit of a guard of honour and go, you know, and I mean, you know, people like Bill are why we do this job. You know, I didn't go into ITU to have loads of patients die on me and not do any good. We went into ITU to save people like Bill, who were going to have hopefully, you know, 30, 40 good years ahead of them. So you know, it's selfishly, it's kind of, we get something out of seeing our patients do well and go home. So, you know, there was everyone rushed down, you know, everybody wanted to be there and see him.
I must say, I mean, this has been one of the most amazing discussions I've been involved in a career in journalism that's gone on for a very long time. It must be quite unusual for you, Amy, to have this level of conversation with somebody that you've treated about what happened.
Yeah. I mean, we do follow-up clinics. So I know Bill's been to follow-up clinic, but I don't actually do those. So one of my colleagues, Rachel, does a lot of those. But she'll always come back and say, oh, you know, Bill's doing really well, or this other patient's doing really well, and they pass messages on to us. So I kind of get it, not directly, but obviously indirectly via my colleagues in follow-up clinic. Okay,
well, thank you both for this part of the conversation. I mean, that's really quite amazing. There's no other word for that. So I appreciate that.
I owe you all more than I can say. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. William Powell, thank you very much.